Should Somaliland be internationally recognized officially? Should it become Africa's youngest nation, officially speaking? That's a debate that has been going on for long. And I know that people have very, very strong views about this, especially if they're from Somaliland, understandably so, or Somalia. I would like to read for you a letter that the US Senate Subcommittee Chairman on Africa wrote to Donald Trump about this particular matter. And then we'll have a brief discussion on that. But as we do that, think at a principle level about this whole issue of sovereignty. Think about what exactly it means, because it is critical to this discussion, not just on Somaliland, but the entire Africa. Here's a letter. Dear President Trump, I write to urge your administration to formally recognize the Republic of Somaliland as an independent state with sovereignty within its 1960 borders. Somaliland first gained independence and international recognition in 1960 before voluntarily uniting with Somalia later that year. Since moving to reclaim its independence in 1991, it has functioned as a stable, self-governing democratic nation. It has held several peaceful elections since 2003, marked by strong voter turnout and peaceful transitions of power. Everything that is written in that paragraph is indeed true. We're going to look at the facts, and then we're going to look at, we as African people, what does sovereignty mean to us, and what should it then mean to Somaliland? Somaliland has emerged as a critical security and diplomatic partner for the United States, helping America advance our national security interests in the Horn of Africa and beyond. I'll pause there to say that it is really, really critical for Somaliland and all other African countries, all other African territories, to be very, very clear when they engage with the United States of America, with the European Union, with China, with all these geopolitical powers. It is very critical for them to never forget this fact, that on the geopolitical chessboard, you are either a pawn or a grandmaster. And if you allow yourself to be treated as a pawn, then you always lose, because you are often serving the agenda of others. That is not to negate the quest for sovereignty, internationally recognized sovereignty. It is just to stress that point, that even the other 54 African countries that are of course recognized internationally, many of them have ceded their sovereignty because they allow themselves to become pawns on that geopolitical chessboard. Let's continue. Let's continue with the letter. Somaliland is strategically located along the Gulf of Aden, putting it near one of the world's busiest maritime corridors. It possesses capable armed forces and contributes to regional counterterrorism and piracy operations. It has enabled the opening of a Taiwanese representative office in the capital of Hargeisa, sought to strengthen ties with Israel, and voice support for the Abraham Accords. Now, right there you begin to see how Somaliland can then easily be reduced to pawn status if they allow it. Now, the good thing is that there has been a healthy debate in Somaliland on these matters right here, especially regarding relations with Israel and the Abraham Accords. There's been a healthy debate, and that must continue, because in the absence of that, it is so easy for any presidency in Somaliland and across Africa to then simply become a pawn. I cannot stress that enough. The government of Somalia has played an unfortunate role in these efforts. In April 2025, the CCP arranged for Somalia to buy Taiwanese passport holders from transiting into Somaliland, and Chinese support to Somalia is benefiting anti-Somaliland groups working to erode its sovereignty. Now, right there, you begin to see how Somaliland can easily be used as a pawn in these broader geopolitical wars, because China insists that Taiwan is part of China. Taiwan, on the other hand, aspires. Taiwan, on the other hand, does not, of course, subscribe to that particular policy position of China. Somaliland cannot be caught in that broader geopolitical war, not just between China and Taiwan, but also China and the United States of America itself. Somaliland has to guard strongly against that. Now, is it possible for them to strike that balance between gaining US support, US recognition as an independent sovereign nation, but at the same time not allowing the US to become a grandmaster that is then using it as a pawn? That's the big question. Let's finish the letter. Despite these threats, Somaliland remains committed to forging closer ties with the US and is actively engaged in enhancing military cooperation, counterterrorism efforts, and economy and trade partnerships. To do so to the greatest effect and the greatest benefit to American national security interests, it requires the status of a state. I urge you to grant that recognition. As always, I stand ready to provide you with whatever resources and support you require in helping to secure this goal. Now, that's America's position. The big question is, does the African Union have a position on this matter? Because traditionally, the African Union tends to shy away from such matters. Does it have a strong position on this matter? What about the other African countries? Is Somaliland's quest for sovereignty, for recognition, international recognition as a sovereign nation, has that been swept under the carpet by most other African nations? It is time to talk about these matters openly and to have a conversation instead of talking at each other. Remember, that conversation will then begin to address matters like Somaliland was colonized by the British. In fact, it was initially known as British Somaliland. Somalia itself was initially colonized by Italy and was initially known as Italian Somaliland. Djibouti was initially known as French Somaliland because it was colonized by the French. Do you then see how these amazing African territories were just pawns to these European colonial masters? And we think that is finished, but it's not. Because even independent, sovereign, internationally recognized African nations continue to be treated as pawns. So, can we talk about the issue of African unity, the issue of making these colonial borders irrelevant, while at the same time addressing the issue of a country like Somaliland that simply wants to be recognized? Can we have that balance without treating the people of Somaliland as somehow unworthy to pursue their own sovereign aspirations, or Western Sahara for that matter? Can we have this conversation without shouting at each other, screaming at each other? Because if we can successfully have that conversation, we will be able to address the issue of how can we balance sovereign aspirations of African nation states and that quest for African unity that is not just unity on paper, but in reality. Remember, That must be a journey that the nearly 1.5 billion Africans must be a part of, because after all, Africa is them. Africa is about the people of Africa themselves. So what's your thoughts on this particular issue of Somaliland's desire, need, quest, aspiration to be internationally recognized as a sovereign nation, to be internationally recognized, and to follow the footsteps of South Sudan? What are your thoughts on that? What can you add to that conversation without belittling the views that are contrary to yours? At the end of the day, we're Africa, and we must be a grand master on that geopolitical chessboard, and not a pawn.